I first met Jan and Chip. And I vividly remember it. It was in the summer of 2009. And Jan and Chip and Elsie Spittle came to London to do a weekend workshop. And my life basically hasn't been the same since then. And it's kind of interesting, actually, because I got really impacted on the day. Like, I suddenly saw things very, very differently. And I'd never had an experience like that before, where my perception and my moment to moment experience and just my levels of well-being and peace and that sort of thing could change so much just sitting in a room in a group of people and listening to them. And so that weekend we became friends, and I've been out to Salt Spring where Jan and Chip live many times and spent time with them, and been to the school that they run with Elsie and been really impacted there. And a few years ago, I guess it was probably 3 or 4, no, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Chip and I did a retreat in Sitges in Spain, and it was amazing. Funnily enough, this is another propitious thing. In the month before that retreat, I got an email from a guy who said, "Hey, we've never met before, but you've got some retreat coming up. Can I come?" And I said, "Well, it's not exactly for everybody. Let me get on the phone with you and see if you're going to be a good fit." And so we get on the phone, and I had a coaching conversation with him, and he got really impacted in that conversation. And he said, "Sign me up. I'm coming on the retreat." So he came on the retreat, and he saw something of this understanding, and it changed the way he works, and it changed the direction of his life. And this week, yesterday, a book that he wrote based on these principles called, I think it's called Inside the Soul of Islam, was released and became the #1 Amazon bestseller in Sufism, because it was Mamoun Yousaf. So let me get the title right, because I'll feel badly if I've got it wrong. But yeah, so yeah, Mamoun's book was released yesterday, Inside the Soul of Islam. It hit the #1 spot it's still the #1 bestseller in Sufism, and it is basically, at the moment he told me that he'd got a deal with Hay House, I was really excited, because I knew that he'd be taking this understanding into the Islamic world, which is a world where there's huge, networks of people who are ready to hear something. So that's amazing. So that happened on that first retreat. And then 2 years later, Chip and Jan gave me a call, and they said, "Hey, we've got an idea. We want to come to London and do a 1.5-day workshop for couples. And would you help us put that on?" And I didn't tell them this at the time, but I kind of went, that sounds really hard. And a day and a half in London and just couples. So it's like, and I said, I know, I said, leave it with me. I said, leave it with me. And a week passed. And after a week, I called them back and I said, "I've got a better idea," or a different idea. I don't think I would have said a better idea, a different idea. Why don't we go to the Canary Islands with a group of people who just want to go deep into this understanding? But a day and a half, you can't justify a day and a half after flying all the way to the Canaries. So why don't we go for a week and just have a really, really lovely time? So they said, that sounds good. And it's been my huge pleasure to work with and be friends with and learn from Jan and Chip over these years. And so what I wanted to do is share them with you guys and give you guys an experience of of what I've been experiencing these last 8 years. Why don't we start by, I'll do a very brief intro, which is to say, Jan and Chip are two of the most experienced teachers in the world of the Inside Out understanding, as articulated by Sid Banks. They work with blue chip corporations. They work in prisons and halfway houses. They've worked with, is pretty much, if you can name a type of person, they've worked with them. And the cool thing is, like, and it's kind of interesting, because what I notice with Jan and Chip, as much as anyone I've ever met, are totally committed to living from the truth of this understanding and the feeling of this understanding. In fact, it was Chip who said back in 2009, well, then I was brand new to this understanding back then. Like, I was just kind of going, oh, there's something to this at that point. And in this workshop, we were all in this amazing feeling. And he said, you know, there's information in the feeling. And I'd always thought of information as being like concepts or ideas or models. And the idea that a feeling had information in it, I simultaneously knew that it was true and felt like I was hearing something I'd never heard in my whole life before. And so, yeah, it's just great to have you guys with us. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to have you with us. And Jan and Chip, let me unmute your microphone. I didn't mean to keep you muted the whole time. That was accidental.
Oh, well, as you can see, our lips weren't moving. So I'm going to close this door. Could you hand me that phone? I'll put that in the drawer.
So thank you, Jamie. That was a wonderful introduction. And I'll tell you, it's been a wonderful adventure knowing Jamie and working with him as well. And I remember, maybe I'll say too much, but the heck with it. I remember when I first met Jamie, I had this dual experience of seeing somebody who was a little bit puzzled, but at the same time totally open. And I just remembered, this is really neat. This person is really, really neat. I remember we went for a walk with Jamie. And you know that feeling, one of the things about the principles and the people we know and meet throughout the principles is you just keep meeting friends for life. You know? And it really doesn't matter who or what they are on the surface or how they present themselves. There's just something deeper than that. And that's what we got when we met Jamie. It was just this feeling of this person who had searched in earnest throughout his life for understanding and was a little bit puzzled, I think, at the simplicity perhaps that we were talking about, but was so open. And I remember that walk was absolutely amazing. And when we came back from that particular work in London, it was meeting Jamie that stood out to us. And that we sensed that we'd met somebody who really was in service to the world and would gain more and more understanding. And that's proven to be true. So it's our honor to work with Jamie as well, and with all of you.
And my first impression, I've got to share.
No, Jan, you mustn't tell that. I'm just kidding.
I gotta hear it now.
We all went to lunch, and I remember that Jamie, that you were just so down to earth, and ordinary, and I love that, because a lot of times we go to gatherings of people that are interested in learning about the principles or learning about life, and there can be like a intellectual kind of discussion or whatever, but with you it wasn't like that. It was just like just going for lunch with a good old friend, and who was just so easy to be around and comfortable, and yet very there was just a really nice feeling about you, and I could tell you're just a wise young man. And so that was my first impression of just being able to just relax and not feel like you had to go into discussions or anything, just have a nice lunch together. And that really, to me, is so beautiful, because that's where we really learn. That's where I feel like I learn, in the simple things in life, and not trying to figure it out or intellectualize, just sharing beautiful moments with people and seeing where that leads.
And actually, that's a pretty good description of the programs that we've done with Jamie in the Canaries. It's been, when Jamie was talking about there's information and a feeling, when Sid Banks used to say that when we first got to know him, I just could not get what that meant. You know, there's information and a feeling. And I try and find the information. You know, I didn't quite see it. You know, I got a nice feeling, but I don't know what the information is, right? And that stayed with me for a while, right? Until my head got quiet enough, my thoughts settled down enough, that I had those first experiences of just being so quiet that you knew everything was okay. You knew that anything you're going through was in the world of thought. And you knew that the feeling you were experiencing, the information, actually, the only way I can put it, it was the experiencing of your true self. The only way you can really know your true self is not through your head, because you're going through the very vehicle that's kept you separate from the true self, innocently. So for me, the information and the feeling is really that sense of being home, that sense of standing in your true self. It's the only way you can know. You have to experience who and what you are on the inside. And when you experience who and what you are on the inside, you actually see a new world, because suddenly you're looking through a completely different lens at this thing we call the world, this experience of life.
It struck me when you said that about information, that they don't call it outformation. and I studied Latin in high school, and I love when you hear a word that you've always heard and you think you know what that word means, but somewhere there were where those words originated, you know. And information, it just struck me what a beautiful word, because like you didn't know what information you were looking for. You thought like in terms of all the books you read and the theories and everything. But what Sid was, when he talked about information, he was always pointing us inside. And he knew that we'd been looking outside for information about how to fix our unhappy lives, reading all the books and everything, and looking for theories. And so when he talked about information, I guess I had always thought I understand that word, but right now it's just coming to me that it's something that's coming from inside you. Like that's why teachers talk about the true learning is bringing it forth from the student. And so I just love that idea that it's not about the world of form out there. It's looking inside before the form.
Yeah. Absolutely. And at the same time, it's interesting though, it's at the same time, you're looking inside and you have this beautiful feeling. But when you actually look back at the life you've lived and the experience that you've been having, you see that from a completely different place. And so then there is actually information about the world you're living in. Mm-hmm. It's so fascinating. Like the simplest example of that for me is those who know me know that I grew up in a very violent environment, you know, with a lot of abuse. And as a young man, I was aggressive, angry, depressed, all the stuff that you would expect to come out of that experience, right? And I had tried every possible avenue to relieve that feeling of stress and insecurity that I lived with. And, you know, at best I could get some temporary relief when I meditated or went to the Zendo or whatever, but it actually just kept getting worse as time went on. Then when we met Sid Banks, and actually Jan did first, and I wanted nothing to do with it, you know, because this was just way too simple. Things began to change. When I look back at it now, it's kind of puzzling because our marriage was coming to an end when we met Sid Banks. right? And after meeting him and the changes we started to experience when we first started to listen, our world changed without understanding specifically what in that world we hadn't worked on anything. It just changed, right? And it was puzzling in that sense because I've been so used to working on it, you know, working on this issue and this habit and this problem. And suddenly it was just falling away without that kind of effort. But the first time I really saw something about information and feeling in terms of my life and my experience and looking back was we'd become really happy. Our marriage had just come back together. We were feeling really good. We were enjoying life. And I had this experience where, and I'm not going to tell the whole thing here, but I started thinking about my father and some of the horrific things I've been through one night. I was laying in bed, actually. And as I thought about it, after having all these nice feelings for a long time, I went really back in the past. I really took a nosedive. And I could feel the hatred. I could feel the bitterness about it. It just, all of a sudden, I was back there. I was literally back there with all those feelings again. And out of nowhere, as I'm laying there in bed, that just kind of broke. It just stopped of its own accord. And I remember feeling this beautiful, peaceful feeling and a sense that everything was okay, and a really deep sense that the past no longer mattered, that it only existed in thought. And I had never felt a feeling or experienced a sense like this before. And as I lay there in that beautiful feeling, the strangest thought occurred to me. It's a thought I had never had before about my life. The thought was simple. I just had this insight that my father was living in a world that was handed to him. He didn't know there were boundaries to that world. He didn't know that there was anything better. You know, he was lost in that illness, in that sickness of mind, sickness of thought. And I just happened to be born in his house, you know? And I know that sounds simple, but it changed my entire personality forever. I mean, I've had my ups and downs, don't get me wrong, but the essence of how I reacted to the world, how I responded to this world changed forever in that moment, right? And the reason I share that is that way of looking at my father, at my experience, had never, ever, ever occurred to me before, right? It was absolutely new thought. And that new thought didn't come from any stored thought I had, because before that moment when I was in that hell, as I lay there, that was the thought that I was accustomed to and that I believed, you know, in that hell that I was in. And then suddenly I saw my father's psychological innocence in it. That didn't come from here. That came from the wisdom of that quiet. What we see when the thinking we do over and over again, for whatever reason, just stops for a moment, right? And the world that we've been creating, moment to moment, from the past with our thinking, just stops. And the second that stops, we see a new world, because we're looking at it through a clear lens, through from a neutral place. You know? And that's my definition of wisdom, and that's why these retreats that we do, I love that we come together and we move more and more towards that direction, towards that peace. And we start to have it. What I love is Sid's favorite thing in this life, when he was with us, his favorite thing, after every session he did, after every class he taught, he'd be like a child in a candy store. He would say, "Did you see the change in that person's face? Did you see them, how they were carrying themselves? Did you see how it started?" He just loved watching the change in people's faces. And Jan and I know Jamie's the same. I love that. I love that, because there's no amount of intellectual convincing that can bring that about. The only reason that happens is that person, whoever it is in the group, somehow inside themselves gets quiet enough to stop the world. And then see the world as it truly is, as opposed to as we think it is.
That's what's so beautiful to me lately with my work mentoring is that I feel that as I watch people lighten their spirits as we're talking, that I'm in tune with it. I guess the more my mind gets quieter and my life gets more peaceful, I'm more open to seeing that innocence in other people and feeling that peace and being a better listener. And so I find lately that in the sessions, I'm vicariously experiencing that feeling that people are feeling as they're talking. Like they might, whether they started out happy and then they get happier, or they're starting out the session and they're really down, and then a little bit later they feel uplifted. I feel like that it's just one being experiencing that feeling, even though there's two people, one on the screen and one sitting here. More and more, I'm feeling that joint experience, and I think that there's nothing more beautiful than that. And I know that all of us in life, the whole thing is that you don't stay in one place. I mean, you could, but then it doesn't work that way. There's always learning, at a deeper level, and so my work, I find, is going deeper as I just get more of that beautiful feeling in my life. Automatically it translates into how I'm listening and connecting with people, and I love it, because you think in your head that, well, I'm going to do my work today and it'll be the same as it was yesterday or whatever, but it's not. And I'm open to watching it grow. And now that I'm catching on how it really does keep growing, I don't know where it will take me and how even deeper it will go, but I feel like I'm the one who's learning all the time. And I just happen to be having that learning in the presence of someone else. And as like Sid used to say when we first met Sid, and we, as a couple, we'd had our struggles. And he said, what's beautiful is with someone, when you have a relationship with someone and you are both really interested in growing and learning, that you'll see that one person will go deeper, and then the other person will go deeper. And so it's always, there's always that potential to learn from each other. And before, with us, it was the opposite. We were just unlearning, we were getting more and more into unhappiness and lostness. But when we reverse that and watch the competition go away and the insecurity go away, there's been that feeling of always uplifting. And that's not always happening, but to see that that's the way the world is supposed to be, is that we're all meant to go deeper together into that oneness.
And there's always more.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that occurred to me as I was listening to you, Jan, was that because I used to be an NLP trainer, and I had a certain skill set and that sort of thing. And people used to say to me sometimes, other trainers and stuff, they would say, I learn as much from my students or my clients as they learn from me. And my response used to be, not me so much. And I would be kind of like, I can see how for you that, but it was a point of kind of, I don't know if it was a point of pride or no, I think it was just like, it just didn't look relevant to me, because it was like, I knew so much, and that's why they came to me and that sort of thing. And since doing this work, I get it, because like I've seen again and again and again, whoever walks in the door, whether it's for a one-to-one or a group session or whatever, they can walk out the door seeing this more deeply than I do. Like they can start the session, you know, struggling and me trying to point them in the direction of something, and we can finish the session, them teaching me. It really, and I think it's a level playing field. And for people who want to work with others and are, you know, people helpers and transformation professionals, I think that's just one of the greatest gifts you can give your clients, but also give yourself, because it's interesting. It kind of takes the pressure off. Like I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that my clients have everything they need because I know who they really are. And that's something I first learned. I first learned listening to a Sid recording. Actually, I was still in the kind of, what even is this stuff anyway? And so I was seeing something, and I was talking to a group of my buddies about what I was seeing. And then I said, let's put on this recording of this Sid Banks and see, I kind of like it. And we're listening to this recording, and I suddenly knew that the fact that you can even see or hear or feel means you have that source of well-being within you, and it's true for everyone. And I went from not knowing that to knowing that. So I'd say to everyone who's listening here tonight, you know, I know that I speak for Jan and Chip when I say there is no substitute for listening to Sid, watching his videos, reading his books like that. I have learned so much, just like being impacted so deeply from watching and listening and to Sid and reading about it. And then working with you guys, you helped me understand what the hell was going on. So that was really good too. And to realize that just knowing that about my fellow human being is actually the greatest gift that I can give them, more than anything I say or anything like that. Just seeing the truth of it in my the person I'm with is the most valuable thing that we each have.
For sure. You know, on the big picture level, that truth, that under all of our thinking, no matter who we are, no matter what our current condition is, that the true self, because it's spiritual in nature, can never be damaged. So we know that everybody we meet and everybody we talk to has health, total health within. That is the essence of how the three principles are going to and continue to impact psychology. Because if we understand what a human being is, you know, at a deeper level, that a human being is a spiritual being in essence, living in this physical world. And that spiritual being, in spite of whatever thought it takes on, whatever habits it takes on in this life, that spiritual essence is always healthy, it's always there, it's never gone anywhere. So for psychology, it presents a very critical shift, an absolute total shift in terms of the perspective of what the work is. You know, up until the introduction of the principles, the work has been to somehow try and unravel all of this thinking and see where it started, and the evidence of that being any help to anybody is slim to none, you know. And then along comes this little shift, this simple shift in terms of our total understanding of what a human being is. And we're given this gift of seeing that it's not going through the thoughts that have damaged us that creates the repair. It's going back to that moment when health exists and then looking back at life and seeing it with understanding. So all of the wonderful doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, I talked to a wonderful psychiatrist, easy for you to say.
A trick cycling.
Wonderful psychiatrist I talked to yesterday who is very new to the principles. And it's really neat because this person says, I don't understand this, but I just know it's right. I just have this feeling. The second I heard her talk about it, I knew it's what I've been waiting for all my life. And this person said, so I started just doing my best as people walked in my office to see them as healthy and to speak to them about the fact that that health exists. And she said, I'm shocked. The results are shocking. Just in very few words in the very first attempt to share it. And so you see that this is a profound shift in how we serve people, how we help people, and that field is going to explode the more it accepts that, the more that it sees that. I love when Jamie talks about germ theory and how, there was a time in the world when people didn't believe there were such a thing as these invisible beings that created diseases and so on. And we're at that stage now where it's just beginning to be believed that the infection, the psychological infection, is thought, personal thought. And at the same time, the most profound gift we have as human beings is the power to think. This beautiful, beautiful, neutral power that you just learn to use the wrong way. It's really that simple, And I just love that shift. I guess all great shifts through history in whatever field have always been profoundly simple.
Yeah, if like I don't know if this is a good sign, but I've given this a lot of thought.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And it seems to me that in any aspect of history, when our understanding of life is adrift from the truth, then we make up theories and models and ideas to try and account for it, And as soon as we see the truth of how something works, whether it's Newton seeing universal gravitation, or Kepler seeing the movements of the planets, or, Semmelweis with the germs, or, Copernicus with what was the center of the solar system. As soon as it gets seen, it simplifies. It simplifies because it removes all the false thinking, all the misunderstandings, all the confabulation that has been put in the way. I remember, so there's a video of Sid, one of the last ones he did, which you guys released through the school, called The Ultimate Answer. And I was listening to that once. And he was just talking about evolution. He was just saying, it's just evolution. And it suddenly hit me so deep that, this is because it's so easy to think, because we've got mobile phones and computers and Wi-Fi, that we've figured everything out, and that we're like that close to knowing everything, and that actually we're when it comes to the mind, we as a species are as far adrift in that domain as the ancients were about the movements of the planets or the flatness of the earth or whatever. Though the flat earth is becoming more popular lately, so who knows what's going on.
When you were talking about how when there's a breakthrough in science or others, parts of life, that it's always simple, the true breakthroughs. And what struck me is that, and you were saying then people try and, there's the breakthrough, and then they come up with all these theories to try and explain it and everything. And I was just thinking that I extrapolated that to my life, because when I'm really living in that quieter state and just in harmony with life. And it's not, not 100% of the time, but when I am, and my life flows, and I'm not concerned about whether it will keep flowing. I'm just so grateful for the moment and that beautiful feeling. And then I notice sometimes, like if I wake up in the middle of the night and then my insecurity kicks in and I start thinking about all these little pieces of my life and they're like, they kind of multiply, you start with one and then that leads to, oh yeah, and there's that, leak in the roof, or and this little thing. And then all of a sudden, all these little insecure thoughts about all these things that I need to take care of and before they run away and ruin things. And it just dawned on me, like, that's the same principle of, it's an analogy for that when we get that beautiful feeling and we're given this amazing life and the ability to be conscious as a human being, conscious of this life, but every once in a while we get insecure and think, well, I've got to understand how every little piece of this works and make sure that I'm, controlling it. And so it's the same thing, like we create all these theories and ideas that aren't necessary and actually sabotage us. And if we're lucky enough to have learned about the principles and we understand, oh, that's just me being tired and insecure, and I don't have to know if everything will sort itself out tomorrow or the next day. I just need to relax right now and be in the now and be present in this moment. And so what a gift, though, to know that it is in that simple understanding of life that we're always in our true self, and we always have that ability to just be calm, and that sometimes when we're not, that's okay. But we're like, I see clearly now, like even not that long ago, when I would wake up in the middle of the night with those thoughts, they'd be more compelling and I might stay awake longer. But now, as I get more quiet in my head and more peaceful, and that more beautiful feeling pervades my life more and more, somewhere inside, I know that everything really is okay. It's all going according to some beautiful plan, and that I don't have to get busy in my head trying to be conscious of every little thing in my life, every detail, or other people's lives. What that adds a whole other layer to it, is how other people's behavior is affecting my life, right? So that could take you on a whole other kind of sidetrack. So again, like just getting back to that understanding that thought is our gift, and we don't have to figure out how we're using it or worry about the effects of it. We have to do is realize it's a gift along with consciousness and mind, and that if we are just grateful for that, and then I find the little simple things in life are turning into these amazing joys. They like just getting up and having breakfast is, to me, so thrilling, just to be able to fix what I want and have breakfast. And if I don't on some busy day, that's fine. But that just taking joy in the simple things in life is such a gift, because you're giving yourself the ability to have the happiest life, because those little simple things are always available to us. But if you don't see the beauty in them, in other words, if you're not living in the present and enjoying the present, then you miss out on all that.
I love what you're saying, Jan, and there are three things that kind of overlapped and intersected for me there. And the first, and I'll tell you all three, and then I'd love to hear what you guys both have to say about it, actually. So the first one was, I was imagining some of the folks on this call loving what you're saying, really being into it. And then when you said, and thought is a gift, I can imagine people going, hang on, what? So that's the first thing. And because I know for me, that was the bit when I was reading The Missing Link. It said, thought is a gift. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that's about. So that would be that. I'd love to hear you talk about that. But then what I heard you say, which really, really touched me, was about the simplicity of life and the everyday and the ordinary. And when I was younger, when I was married, actually, and at the time, I was putting huge amounts of energy into trying to become superhuman in terms of everything, like just to excel and excel in every. And my then wife said, you might want to put a little less time and energy into being superhuman and a little more time and energy into being human. And and I really heard her, right? So I that really struck me. And I know when I first came to this understanding, I would hear Sid say things like, just be ordinary. And that was like in stark contrast. Like it was like there was so much in me that had been kind of, I don't know, had bought into the idea that no, that's the you want to be the opposite of ordinary. So that's the second thing, is just that combination of simplicity and the idea of ordinariness. And then the third thing is something that I think ties both together, which is this idea of kind of self-importance. I've heard Sid say many times that the ego is an image of self-importance, and the ego and negativity are brothers. And so I don't know, all three of those kind of jumped out to me as I was listening to you, Jan. So if you guys have got anything you want to say about that, I'd love to hear you.
Well, it's in this discussion, it starts to sound like the intellect's the enemy. And that's just not the case. How we use the intellect, that's a different subject, a very different subject. So when we get quiet and we have insights, right, we step out of the round and round and round thinking of our belief system, and we fall into the now, just that quiet state of being the now. You really can't do that unless you're willing to be ordinary. Because as long as you have those desires and you're always thinking, I wish I was, I wish this was, I want to be that, I want to excel, that's where you are, that's where you live. Right? Now, in everybody that I've known over the years, and I'll just use business as an example, but particularly in business, when I've worked with people in business, it's when their minds get quiet that they start to use their intellect for what it's meant to be, which is to serve you in this world, to do what you really see is your life, what you want. Like when you see, it's not about being passive. When you get quiet enough to see, you don't have to worry about motivation. And then you're thinking, takes that simple insight that you have and uses it in the world, like takes it out into the world. And then the intellect is your servant. Now, when we're caught up in our minds and running thoughts around, I guess the best sign of this is when they're repetitive, when you're in patterns. At that point, your intellect is not serving you, you're serving it. Right? And your life is ruled by the belief systems and patterns of thought that you've accumulated over your life. And so at that point, you're using your intellect. You are, no matter what, you're using your intellect, but you're using it to trap yourself in these patterns. And when the mind gets quiet, and especially if we're lucky enough just to have those moments when all of that just stops, when the chatter stops, when we see something, we have a vision for something we know is right for us, we know it's want to do, then the intellect becomes really the tool it's meant to be, this beautiful, beautiful tool, And so when you talk about thought, the idea we say thought is a gift. We're not talking about our individual thoughts, all of that stuff. You know, that's not what we're grateful for. I mean, some of that's okay too, but what we're grateful for, and the reason we say thought is a gift is the spiritual power called thought. There is no consciousness without thought. There's no life without thought, right? Every breath we take, every experience we have in this world is conveyed to us, to our consciousness, through this power called thought. It's an incredibly beautiful gift. And the other thing I want to say too is, and this, I don't know how this fits with the three things, Jamie, but the natural ego, and all I mean by that is the fact that we experience life as an individual. That's all I mean by that. Just that fact that we come into this life, we experience it as an individual. There's nothing wrong with that. There's really nothing, that's this life. It is what it is, right? Now, the only thing, again, it's just like the intellect. We come into this life, we start having experiences. Some of them are not positive. Sometimes they're neutral, but we make them less than positive. We start developing our coping mechanisms. We start developing our way of protecting ourselves in this life. And that feeling of self-importance begins to grow, right? At some point in that development, which Freud was correct about to that extent, you know, our habits do come from our experiences. But at some point, that bundle of thought that we've stored from our experiences, the coping mechanisms that we've developed, that we think we need to deal with the world, at some point, that bundle of thought becomes our identity. And we shift away from our true, natural identity, our true self. Right? And at that point, the ego that we talk about being the enemy, that's where that is. Right? Now, the very fortunate thing about this ego that's an enemy is that it's an illusion. So it doesn't really matter in the end. It's just a ball of thought.
You know, one of the most beautiful things I ever heard Sid say about the ego was when we were in Tampa in a transition house for women who came out of prison, and there's a CD of that, One Thought Away. And so Sid is in this room, in this old house that was used for this program, residential treatment program. And this woman just started to pour her heart out about how she was so thrilled. She didn't know Sid was going to be speaking there that day. And her life had been just such a mess. And if you hear the CD, you can hear the actual story. But she was saying about how she wants so hard to stop her bad habits. And she knows it's her ego. And so she just, but I keep doing those things, but I want to stop. And, you know, and it might be even just negative thinking she was wanting to stop. And she knew it was her ego. And Sid just said, "Dearie," he said, "don't fight your ego." He said, "You'll only get confused." And I thought, that just stopped me in my tracks when he said that, because it really makes sense. And it's so tempting to, like you said, Jamie, want to be superhuman. So every time we don't live up to what we think we should be, then that creates this tension. And where does that lead you? Leads you back into that little self, and from away from your true self, you're caught up in your personal self and that thinking. And so it really is being able to live with grace as a human being, knowing that part of you is an individual, but the only real you is that true self. And so it takes away that tension that we all live in, you know, that we don't have to, but a lot of the time we do.
It's the same trap for everybody, no matter what. It really doesn't matter if you're an anorexic, a drug addict, a powerful executive who loves money. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We get caught in a trap of our thinking. And the beautiful thing that we're learning to understand is that that's an illusion, and that when we get quiet, we feel that beautiful feeling that comes when we just, I think one of Sid's talks, he says, everyone searches for silence. Everybody on the planet searches for silence. And the silence he's talking about is silence from this noise of thinking from the past. To be in this moment, to be in the now, totally in the now. If you're in the now, it's very simple. No thoughts from the past, minimum of thoughts from the past. When you're truly in the now, no thoughts from the past. But it doesn't mean no thought. You can't be alive without thought. But in that beautiful state, that's when beautiful new thought comes, original thought. Okay? And original thought that's born out of a true understanding of your own true nature. That your own true nature is your divinity. That part of you, I don't like terms like God because people have so many words and ideas attached to it, but whatever you want to call it, that essence that isn't of this physical world, the light behind the system, whatever you want to call it, right? The energy behind the system. We're all plugged into that or we wouldn't be alive. That's what mind is. That's who we are at our essence, at our true essence. And that's why I just love those retreats that we do with you, Jamie, because that's the only goal. I mean, it's not even a goal. It's just, we just go there and we have this feeling, we tell stories, and talking story is great because we're not talking theory. We're telling stories where people can go, oh, you know, and they're going inside of themselves. And listen to Sid. Jan said something a while ago that really hit me. She said that she realized lately that in the mornings, for instance, when she's listening to Sid, she's going for that quiet, she's not actually listening to Sid. She's listening for a feeling and then listening to herself. You know? And I really feel that we've had a wonderful time just experiencing that together at those retreats. And as far as sharing this with the world, in whatever way we want, whether we want to be a coach or we're a therapist or just an ordinary person enjoying life, okay? In my humble opinion, the only authority that anybody has to discuss these principles in a way that helps people is the authority of their own experience. Right? The experience of being in that feeling and knowing that health exists. That's what gives people power in their sharing, power in what they give to the world. It's their own experience. You know? There's lots of wonderful teachers out there, and we can learn from all of them. But the true learning, the moment of true learning, is always inside. Always inside.
So if we were all in the same room together, I would say, now's a good time for us to have a break. You know, it's a real treat for us to get this time together. So, you know, to everyone here, Chip and Jan are two of the people who have been mentors to me and have had just an extraordinary impact on how I understand the nature of working with other people, but also in my own life as well. Like I could, it's interesting actually. I'm editing my book Results that came out last year. I'm going through and editing it to create the little book of results. And I was talking with my buddy Garrett the other day, and I'd been reading this other book, and this notion was in the book that all results are under the care of your true self. And it really hit me because ever since I've been working with Chip and Jan, I've had this idea that the true self is the source of peace and love and joy and all the things, that we highly value. But the idea that results in the world are under the care of the true self, that seemed like really shocking and new to me, and kind of like, whoa, I like that, but I'm not sure about that. So I was talking to Garrett about it, and he goes, well, all the way through your book Results, you say that. And I'm like, what? I get it. And all the way through it, I'm like, your true self is the source of all results. And I'm like, I already knew that, but my head didn't know it, but my heart knew it. So I don't know what has me saying that, except that what I realized is that when I look back through my life and look at the things that are kind of the turning points that my life has hinged around, and there's probably like 7 or 8 of those. It's not like there's 5,000 of them. There's 7 or 8 of them. And in every single case, it didn't have anything to do with my personal will. It was something completely unexpected. And in one of those cases, it was over a coffee with Jan just a few years ago. And we were talking about love and relationships and that sort of thing. And she said something to me, and my entire view of love and intimate relationships transformed. And it's like, oh, I live in a different world now. And I wasn't looking for that. That wasn't on my kind of plan. And I'm so grateful.